from that, let's move to the idea of Sabbath. You mentioned in the book that too many of us, especially in ministry, we tend to accept overwork in the pastorate as kind of like, well, that's just what it is in the pastorate. We can't do anything about it. I remember
Right.
been 15 years or so ago when I nearly, when I burned out and almost flamed out in ministry, and I ended up in pastoral counseling. And the person who was working on counseling with me had been a pastor for 20 years themselves, so they knew what it was like in ministry. I'd actually gone to a couple counselors before that who had never been pastors. And
Mm.
when I laid out my schedule for them, immediately they were like, okay, no, this is, you got to stop doing this. This is ridiculous.
Right.
And I was like, but that's pastoral ministry. And then I went to a guy who had been a pastor and he was like, yeah, that's just pastoral ministry. Looking back, I almost wish I'd stuck with one of the first two who actually recognized that no, it doesn't matter if it's pastoral ministry or not. This is overwork. This is unhealthy. This is not good. Not taking a Sabbath is problematic.
Yes.
But because they didn't just go, oh, that's just ministry, I thought, oh, they don't understand. And they really did. They knew more than I was giving them credit for because, as you say, right, we accept overwork as not just not a sin, we're not, but in fact, we're rewarded for it.
Right.
How do we start challenging that?
Well, I look at the life of Jesus, and we don't really see him trying to take a day. So, that's what the Pharisees would get all excited about with him, is like, wait a minute, you're doing something on this particular day that should be reserved for the other 6 days. But if you look at Jesus's activities on the Sabbath day and the other 6 days, they look remarkably similar. And so I think that that's one of the things that we have to make sure we don't just try to confine it to a day, because as pastors, we all know that, like, you can have the, in quotes, day off, and that's going to be the day that, a family member calls and they've got a loved one that just got rushed to the hospital. And you can't say, well, sorry, it's my day off. I cannot minister today. Of course, you're going to say, okay, well, I'm going to get down to the hospital and minister to this family. And so what I try to advocate and live out in my own life is, instead of a Sabbath day, Sabbath thing, building it into my schedule, because this is what I see in the life of Jesus when he says, I just got done with ministry. I fed 5,000. I taught them, and now I'm going to dismiss them. And because I feel spiritually depleted, I'm going to go pray. I need to spend this time praying. Or he's on the boat with the disciples. There's nobody to teach right now. There's nothing to do. I'm tired. I'm going to take a nap. So I see Jesus being very tuned in to his physical levels, his emotional levels, his spiritual levels, and listening to the voice of the Holy Spirit saying, you need to replenish. You don't have anything to give here. And that's what we need to, I think, build into our schedules as well, is having the margin in there and allowing ourselves to say, there's going to be seasons. These are really busy days. These are some days I don't have anything. I don't have to fill up the space, and I don't have to feel guilty about looking at my calendar and going, there's nothing on here today. This is a day that I need to replenish.
Yeah, it really is. When you look at Jesus' life, there's no sense in his times of rest, his times away from the crowd, his times alone with the Father. There's no sense of that these are exceptions from the rule, that these are non-ministry times, that all of it is integrated into the whole. It's all necessary parts of it. But we don't do that. We see a day off, a Sabbath day, or even a week away, as somehow something we ought to feel guilty for, or we're not doing ministry because I'm taking the day away from the church building.
Right.
When in fact Jesus saw it as an integrated part of being a healthy person who's able to do ministry, right?
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we have to operate out of a place of health, because, it's kind of like when you're on the airplane, they tell you, if you're traveling with a child, you have to put your oxygen mask on first. You're no good if you've passed out. You can't help that child. And it has to be the same thing with us as pastoral leaders, is we have to say, if I don't have the physical reserves, the emotional reserves, the spiritual reserves, then I can't give to anybody. So I can't really call it ministry at that point, because I'm doing it on fumes, but there's nothing behind it. And so
Yeah.
there are going to be times that we get depleted, but then we have to listen and say, okay, my body is telling me I'm tired. So I'm not just going to artificially kind of keep going through my workday. Well, I need to be at the church building until this time. No, I'm exhausted. I'm going to leave the church building now and go
Mm.
take a nap or do whatever replenishes me physically or spiritually or emotionally. We have to just be very tuned in to that just got squeezed out of me. I have to be refilled.